Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Are You Experienced, the podcast all about the business of experiences. My name's Joe, and this time I'm talking to Dawn Farrow. She's the founder of On Sale Group and has been described as the accidental architect of the live experience revolution. That's a badge she wears with pride, as she's dedicated her career to the art and science of what ultimately drives the live entertainment industry, selling tickets. This is easily one of my favourite conversations so far, so please sit back and enjoy. On with the show. Dawn, welcome to Are You Experienced? Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. So this is a kind of an interesting segue from where the kind of people I've spoken to so far, in that we're going to be talking very specifically about the discipline of marketing within the experience world, which I'm really excited about. And who better to talk to than you in that regard? What I usually ask people to do is start at the very beginning, and just kind of walk us through how you ended up in the experience economy and kind of working in the experiences, because I think you started out as a dancer. Is that right?
Yeah, I did. Yes. So, to be fully transparent, I never dreamt of being a marketer. I didn't know that was a thing. But I didn't even really know about London growing up. So just my background is that I grew up up north in a county called Lincolnshire, and all I dreamt about was being a dancer. I mean, literally, like that's what I got up for every single day. I came to London to pursue that in terms of formal training. And what was incredible, actually, is that whilst I was doing my professional training, I also studied I was meant to be studying a degree in business, but I arrived day one and to sign up, and the first module was budgets. And I just remember being like, no, like, you've got the wrong person. Like, the thing is, I'm a dancer. Like, I'm not going to do budgets because I'm a dancer. I'm just doing business because my mum says I should. And so I, which is totally ironic given my day to day now. So I very quickly changed into marketing, because I think the first sessions were all about branding, and I was like, oh, I could definitely do that. So I studied a marketing degree whilst doing my professional training. And really, I mean, I was very logical in the end, that I realized that after 3 years of training, I was probably the only dancer that also had a degree in business, that I could, sort of think about how to fuse the two. I went, and then I sort of didn't go straight into marketing. I had a couple of different jobs. Probably my most favorite was working at what was then Clear Channel and became Live Nation. I worked in the producers team there for incredible producers like Liz Coops and Gary McQuinn, David Ian. It was an amazing time. And I was a production assistant. And if you ever get the chance to be a production assistant in your 20s, trust me, it's absolutely incredible. You learn everything. And there was this team upstairs that did marketing, and I was like, wow, like, that's pretty cool. Like, and I had an incredible mentor, Richie, who now heads up marketing for Jamie Wilson in the West End. And he was extremely kind to me, really generous with his time and energy. And every night after I'd done my day job as a production assistant, I would go upstairs and I would work. I imagine we worked for another 2 hours or so I would help him on his campaigns. And then I was like, get me in this team. And that was the first time I really got into what was then, I was doing theatrical theatre marketing.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. There's definitely something in this, because I think you're the fourth or fifth person that I've interviewed so far. And we've so far had someone who started out as an actor, George, who you obviously know very well. We've had Matt Ferguson from Storyland, who was a star college football player. We've had Brendan at GPJ, who had a whole music career before he became got into kind of marketing and experiences, and then now you, who trained as a dancer and kind of were taking that part. So there's got to be something that a thread there. That what do you think? Do you think there is something that kind of is it a good grounding, that sort of performance? Performing arts, background. Is that a good grounding?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I'm extraordinarily proud of training as a dancer, and that I got to do it for as long as I did, and that if you have a child who is interested in dance, but you think, oh my gosh, I couldn't bear that, I definitely don't want them to perform. Like, don't like. They're not necessarily going to go into a career of performance, but what I have learned that I have in bucket loads is that sense of resilience. So I absolutely know what it is to fail. And also I know what it is to recover. Like, I learned at a very early age that failure is just part of what happens. Like, it's not the end of anything. And you learn about failure, you learn about resilience, you learn about teamwork, you learn about how to care for others in a team, like how to bring people up, how to take people with you. You learn exactly the same time as being a team player, which is an interesting skill. You learn about being on your own. So the thing about music, acting, dance, if you want to be good at it, like no one's coming to save you. No one's going to say, here's a bucket load of talent, off you go. Like, you already know, like you as an individual, age 15, need to get good at that. And I think that's that sort of grounding for any young person then and now, it's incredible. It's an incredible way to go into any sort of business, actually, any industry.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to come on we're going to end with some advice to young people. So we'll save some nuggets for then. But okay, cool. So really, really interesting sort of path there. But in terms of what you're doing now, so you quite brilliantly been described and referred to as the accidental architect of live experience revolution, which is, the fantastic way to be described. So talk us through that accident and how that's happened, and kind of how you spend your time and energy now.
Yeah. So so that was a very recent title that has been given to me, which I absolutely wear as a total badge of honor. So in May this year, in March this year, I announced a startup. It's called On Sale Group, and On Sale Group has two parts to it, one of which is called On Sale Live, and the other is the Global Institute of Experience Marketing. And On Sale Live was and is the first time that sales, marketing, and communication specialists from across the experience economy had been invited to come together in a conference format to network, to learn, to communicate, to inspire one another. And I think that the title I've been given there is this kind of this observation that, having done marketing across the experience economy for 20 years, I realized that actually it's all getting harder. And perhaps, I was working, I'd set up a very successful marketing agency, but more recently had been working as a consultant on my own. And I couldn't work out, like, was I feeling isolated? Was I the only one worried about how will I sell more tickets in the future? Was I the only one thinking, how do you stay ahead on marketing trends? And when I spoke to a few, fellow consultants, but also agency owners or, great account directors in across the industry doing marketing, and they said, no, we feel like that as well. And there's been this huge shift. Like when I was in my early marketing career, I only did theatre marketing. So I did theatre touring, and then I did on shows like the first Starlight Express tour, the first Cats tour, for example. And then I did West End. And when I did West End, I predominantly did plays. And then there was this moment where we didn't even talk about the experience economy, but I remember I was working at AKA, and my boss there at the time, Adam Kenwright, he said, right, I've got this crazy project that's coming into us. It's called Bodies, the exhibition. It's this incredible German creator, and you've never seen anything like it. And Bodies was just the amount of press that Bodies created, and it's easy to look up, but essentially it was the most, I mean, talk about immersive, like this is early days, what am I thinking? 2006, 7 has to be.
Right.
And essentially they were they were, real bodies that had been dissected, and you could see, like you could all of a sudden like look at like the ligaments in the body, or you could look at an eye socket, and it was, but the press was just wild on it. But it was sort of this moment when our appetite for experiences was changing. And since then, that has, of course, exploded. And what I see now is this kind of broad experience economy, so be it immersive, be it theatre, be it music, be it festivals, be it consumer events. And all of a sudden, the market is flooded with incredible ways to spend your time. And both my time as a consultant and my time as a startup owner of OnSale Group is really dedicated to saying, how do we get more people in the room? How do we create these amazing experiences? How do we make sure that, we create a transaction of a ticket, and that at the end of the day, we're delivering memories, really.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, obviously, in terms of what we do, that idea of memorability and making sure that those moments of emotional resonance are being delivered is that's very much the language that we talk. So, I mean, that's all sounds logical and straightforward in terms of the way you describe it, right? But you've obviously sold millions of tickets across your career, all the different shows that you've worked on. What is different? What is the nuance and the kind of complexities of marketing experiences specifically and selling tickets versus, marketing products and services more sort of traditionally?
So, I mean, of course, there are many. I think that there's a few things that I notice when people come from other industries into thinking they might want to experience, selling live experiences and entertainment. The first is, honestly, like it's a really plain one: budget. So the budgets we are playing with are generally much smaller. That doesn't mean the commercial ambition or the commercial upside isn't potentially as big, but it definitely means that the marketing department, like you're almost running on empty before you even get started, which makes it a massive challenge. And within that there is I know that in the film world, for example, the marketing department are like central, right? They're absolutely central to everything. Whereas I do find in the experience economy, we are one of the teams involved, but we are definitely not, the central team. And that's not a complaint. That is just an observation of how the industries are set up slightly differently. I also think that because we're working with smaller budgets, I, as a marketer, have to be pretty good about knowing about all parts of a marketing campaign. Sat here, particularly with huge changes across the advertising landscape in the last year, I need to be as good at knowing about how to advertise and how to use AI, for example, as almost as an AI only specialist. Because I then need to talk to my clients or, my projects. I need to talk to them about that. And then I also need to know how that turns into the change around search. But then I also need to know about Google ads and how that's still really, so, and on and on and on and on. So we become incredible marketers, essentially these kind of sort of a jack of all trades, and potentially a master of none ultimately. But my job is really to know about all parts of the marketing mix and when to use them, when to dial them up and when to dial them down.
And that's a function as well of, lower budgets means smaller teams, and you have to have to be a kind of a generalist that is comfortable wearing different hats so that you can kind of cover the ground you need to cover, right? So you don't have a team to draw on necessarily, or lots of agency relationships to draw on. Is that that's kind of what you mean?
Yeah, it is, and also, like we're dealing with extraordinarily smart people, right? So just because we're working on smaller budgets, doesn't mean that our questioning and our appetite to do, what Tottenham might be doing. Like we absolutely know what we want to be doing. We just won't necessarily have the budget to do it, but we need to have done the research, asked the questions, worked out a few answers, and then come up with our version of that campaign that is probably based on a tenth of somebody else's budget.
Yeah. So that kind of process, you sort of touched on it there, that process of understanding an audience, figuring out positioning and messaging, and then, activating a campaign around that. That's the same effectively. But when you think about channels, and obviously you mentioned cinema and film there, right? So that is all about kind of broad reach TV campaigns and trailers and all this kind of stuff, right? For experiences, obviously there's a much more local element, first of all, so you don't necessarily need to advertise to the whole world or communicate with the whole world. What's the sort of the channel mix that you kind of typically, or how do you think about that? Is it campaign by campaign, or are there tried and tested channels that work really well for experiences?
I think the channels are the same. Like I think that, so where we start off, you can almost, the fact that it's a live ticketed experience or event sort of is secondary to the fact that you will use the same channels as if I don't know, I was marketing loo roll, right? So there are advertising principles in that. I think the difference for experiences is actually we have the opportunity to have much more fun when it comes to content. And I see increasingly that the content that we can create should be better informing the formats and the placements and how we do our marketing. And therefore, you have to treat each project very differently because your access to talent might be different, or you may not have any. So take the Friends experience, for example, in London, or indeed Squid Game, the experience, both incredible experiences, but neither involve actors, which sounds, you think, oh great, so you've got no actors. Well, actually no, that can create a challenge that is different to as if I was doing a musical, right, in the West End. Because if you're working with actors in the West End, like you can work with them to create content, whereas when you don't have performers, all of a sudden, okay, well that's a different limitation, and you take those limitations and you work accordingly. But do you see how, like, already you go, okay, different content, different placements probably, just because one has actors and one doesn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I suppose there's another, because with those two examples, that is IP that you have invested in order to, that's part of the marketing plan, right? Ultimately, is that we've got this IP, we built the show around that IP, and we've paid the money so that is going to bring people through the door. That's the reason to invest in the IP, right? So how do you think about maximizing that opportunity, I suppose, from a marketing perspective? So you have the IP in the case of Friends and Squid. Obviously there's no actors involved, but the IP itself, the brands that you're kind of that you've invested in, I suppose there's two to this question. There is, how do those deals work in terms of your ability to use those brands and the assets and things like that? And, do you have free reign to use those sorts of things? And second of all, how do you think about balancing that with the brand safety requirements, if you like, of those IPs that you're invested in? So I suppose it's really a question about the nature of those deals, those IP
Yeah,
licensing deals.
great question. So the first thing, let me answer the second part first, because that is slightly easier. So when I get to work on a global IP, which we can see there is sort of a movement to work on much bigger, much more global, much more impressive global IP, which of course comes with a different set of rules and pressures. But I always think that for a period of time, so for 6 months to a year, I am an extension of their brand team. And therefore, for that period of time, I am a guardian of it. And it's interesting. So psychologically, I feel that I have a responsibility to that brand. They're not paying for me, right? Because I get paid by the producers and that team. But I know that part of my job is for them. The second part, though, is that piece around IP itself. And my personal observation is that it's, of course, a blessing and a curse, because the curse can be, oh my gosh, like there is already baked within this brand, there are a set of assumptions that you already have about it. And I can't undo those, because they are, depending on how old the brand is. So, something like Friends, which is over 30 years, something like Squid Game, which is obviously much more recent, but psychologically you will have, a reference point and a set of values associated to that brand. I can't undo either of those things. It means that the producers who are creating content in relation to that IP either are really smart enough to know the relationship of you think about fandom and the power of fandom, the relationship of the fans with that brand is this, therefore the experience I should create is this. So Friends experience, perfect example. What do people want to do? I mean, they want to be in the apartment. They want to be in the apartment and they want to be on the sofa. And it's not, and it isn't, it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. But what I would say is, just because the IP exists doesn't mean the fans want to do your version of the experience. So, and I see this a lot, for example, more traditionally. So take a play. So where someone might say, this book has sold 10 million copies and now I'm turning it into a play. I mean, it doesn't, just because it's sold 10 million copies doesn't mean I want to see the play version. And it's a really, that's where sort of marketing and producers, sort of creative teams need to work together to say, what is the version? Because there is something in that 10 million people have read this book, but what is the version of that people want to see or want to buy a ticket for?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I mean, this is an area that we are thinking about a lot, and are actually, we're kind of in the process of creating some sort of tools to help unpick this kind of idea of IP format. The sort of third leg of the stool is location, right? That's kind of how we sort of think about it, at least, is that, if you have an IP, then you need to think about, like you've just said there, what's the sort of the audience in terms of size and breadth, and is this an IP that is evergreen or stable enough that it's going to be worth creating something that extends into the future, or is it more of a flash in the pan thing that's going to suit a pop-up, for example? And then on the format side, still on the IP side, there's a sort of a DNA of that IP, like the size and complexity of the world that IP's around. Things like, the number of characters or different kind of things that you can play with. All of those different components determine what the right sort of format is, right? So we're kind of in the process of trying to codify that a little bit and make it really easy to sort of draw those links. But it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. And then the final bit is location, right? So it's
you've got a concept, you've got an IP in a format, or not necessarily an IP at all, but you've got a format that you think is going to work. And then it's really important that you put that in a place that is logical and kind of makes sense, and that is going to not create too much friction that's going to stifle the sort of footfall and ticket sales. So yeah, it's really interesting conundrum, and lots of plates you have to sort of spin in your mind to kind of get the right answer, I think.
Totally. And listen, I think location is I mean, I know people will look for location for an incredibly long time and then end up back with the bleeding obvious, or because it was available, or because actually it's an 8 out of 10. You know, like it's especially in our big global cities, it's where people are like, oh, I want that. You know the warehouse that nobody's found. No, there isn't one. There isn't one, right? Because literally, like, you're 25 years too late to find the warehouse that no one's found. Like, no, that warehouse is going to cost you a flipping fortune, and it will be in East London, and you will work out that it is so cost prohibitive that you will default into, oh, can I turn this proscenium arch theatre into something that works for me? You know?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I suppose it is a case of, I mean, like you say, because the thing that underpins all of that, right, is business model. So you've got to then, it's all well and good having those three pillars in place, but you then need to figure out a business model that makes it viable based on all those things.
Absolutely, and you're so right, because then what happens is all of a sudden, like, oh, we need to build a venue. Whoa, what? Okay, we need to build a venue. Okay, well, we didn't plan on building a venue, therefore that's going to cost more. Where do we save costs? Let's take some money from marketing. They'll never notice because we haven't told them what the budget is yet. But also, don't forget that marketing now need to placemate that brand new venue that you're building as well as the event. You know, so you go. It's a really delicate. I mean, I love it, but it is a very delicate mix.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and because there's no right answer, right? It is a blend of those four, I guess, elements. You know, that IP, and the DNA and the audience of that IP, the format that is appropriate for that. Where should that be? And then business model is more complicated, but it's like pricing, for example. How expensive should tickets be to maximize throughput and attendance? And so that's just a really interesting challenge, I think, and one that we're kind of keen to participate in, because it's all about data and insight ultimately is the solution to that.
Absolutely.
Cool. So I mean, we've spoken a lot there about marketing experiences, so experiences as the product, if you like, that's being marketed, but how about experiences as a marketing channel and a way for, well, we've spoken this but for our IP owners, right, and all of the stewardship that you feel around those brands and those IPs, because they are using experiences to extend that brand and that IP into, even though it's revenue generating. What about just purely using experiences as a way for brands to kind of create the connections and associations that drive those more long-term, so not just about revenue and ticket sales, but kind of long-term brand impact? As a marketer, does that sort of change how you would approach the strategy and kind of promotion of different events and experiences?
Honestly, I think I am not sure how many what I would consider more traditional marketers really understand the power of a live experience. So even if it's not ticketed, but the sense of live, and the transformation and the way you build emotion in order to, put something into the memory bank and value that brand more. There are some, businesses that do, and I have, even just a couple of weeks ago, and you may have seen this campaign. But obviously, I'm working with AI a lot, fascinated by the opportunities and the threats. But what I loved most was that Claude, which is one of the more successful LLMs out there, all of a sudden we're doing a live cafe pop-up, and not just come, and that all of their languages, come, spend time, you be in the space, connect. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So, I mean, even a brand that is, say, tech, these are the things we're solving for you, absolutely understands the need to build memory and build connection. It's one of the most brilliant examples I've seen recently that has reassured me about the power of live, of in person, it's one of the reasons that I run the Global Institute of Experience Marketing. We have this one-day marketing masterclass, and people will ask me, "Is it online?" And I'm like, "No, like it is in person. It is in person. Small, we have 15 people training on any given day, and it needs you've got to be there, got to be in person, and I think." The reality is in that case, it's how we learn more, but it's also this just reiteration of the need to be in person, seeing it live, building the memories. So I really love to see, and I would love to work with more, tech brands or high street brands who are saying, I want to know, how do I do the experience version of my brand, and how do I get the fans and create the fandom to want to be in those spaces?
Yeah, it's super interesting. What do you think it is? Like you said there, you don't think that brand managers or brand owners in other sectors see the value of experiential as a brand building, channel. Why do you think that is, or why do you think people are reluctant to, the barometer of any channel is how much cash flows into it from brand budgets, right? So why do you think people are reluctant to put more budget through experiences?
Because it's really hard to measure. So for a brand,
set you up for that one.
yeah. It's incredibly. I mean, that is literally my whole career, right? It's extraordinary. It's very, very expensive. So I think people think, oh, we'll just do a bit of a pop up, and then they've spanked, £350,000 before they've even, opened the doors, so to speak, on a small experiential event. Never mind an actual, theatrical production that's clearly into the tens of millions now. So I think that, and I think that because it is expensive, if you yourself as a marketer are a bit like, I could take it or leave it, therefore you don't push it through. So I live and breathe live events and experiences. That's all I do. I left for a nanosecond, I went and marketed Crufts, which was actually amazing. And it was still a ticketed experience. But I do remember thinking, I'm not around live experience people, because it was part of the Kennel Club, which had a much bigger global remit. I suddenly realized, oh gosh, Crufts is very important to you, but in the calendar, they also had an event called Discover Dogs, which was amazing. Those two things for me were like, oh my gosh, this is how we get more engagement in the Kennel Club. And I really, and that was, I left, as I say, for a nanosecond, and then had to come back into this world that these people who just know, it's not just believe, the power, that the transformation that can occur when someone can experience your brand in person. And if you don't believe that as a marketer, because you spend most of your time, I don't know, marketing hot sauces, I mean, that's probably a really lovely job, and one imagines you maybe even get to leave at 5, which of course in our industry you do not. So, like it's a big ask to say, hey, spend all this money on the hot sauce live experience, which by the way I would probably go to. Now I'm thinking about
Yeah. Yeah. There's that podcast, isn't there, where people eat hot wings with and get interviewed while they eat hot
it.
wings.
Yeah,
Which
she's
is quite a good
amazing.
format.
Yes, you're so
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. But well, so, I mean, again, really, really interesting. I think it seems to me like it's not just experiential necessarily. There's still this, and it is about measurability. There's no doubt about that. But there's two things. There's experiential as a channel relative to other brand building channels like TV or whatever is very difficult to measure. But even on TV, we're only now starting to see this return to kind of brand long-term thinking in terms of marketing and advertising. We've sort of had this almost dark ages of 20 years of everything being performance because the internet made everything so measurable, and it's the kind of the definition of tail wagging dog, where you've got let's do all performance because we can track absolutely everything to the pixel of like this is who saw it, this is what happened, blah blah blah, without thinking about what really matters, which is, okay, how do we do storytelling and kind of make people feel something about our brand and associate it with things that's gonna drive the lifetime value of that customer rather than just convert them at the bottom of the funnel. And I think that is true across all of marketing and all of advertising, but it's particularly, I think, hampering the spend on experiential because, as you say, that it is probably the least measurable channel out of everything, because you don't even get kind of reach numbers necessarily from these things. So it's really interesting.
And yet, what I also find fascinating is that if you look at the explosion of, say, podcasts into live tours, so like some of the most successful podcasts and also some fairly averagely successful podcasts will get out and book a tour and sell tickets because it is such a direct way of making money. Like it's, I'm fascinated, and it's cheap, right? In that scenario, because often you've got maybe one or two presenters, and I don't know, and it's a bit like putting your comedian out on tour. Like you don't need this, you don't need to go, too snazzy with staging and lighting and that sort of thing. Like there is real money to be made by these podcasters just sitting on stage and doing what they were going to do anyway on a podcast.
Yeah, I think that's the golden goose, isn't it? I mean, I think Joe Pine talks about this in his book. He talks about, if you can premiumize that kind of brand experience to the point where you can sell a ticket for it, then it's infinite ROI because you've not it's revenue generating and it's driving that kind of the brand that's going towards your main product or service. So I think that's where the penny will drop for a lot of brands who aren't thinking about this. Looking forward, then I want to do like a bit of a pre-mortem basically on the experience economy, or the live experience revolution that you're the accidental architect of, is kind of gathering steam. It's booming. I don't think there's any denying the sort of the direction of travel. What do you think as an industry is the biggest threat to that trend continuing? If you look ahead into the future, 5 years, a decade, whatever horizon you want, and it's all gone wrong, what do you think is the reason or the reasons?
Yeah, it's a great provocation. Not least, I was reading some data the other day that said the experience economy is set to be worth, I think it stated $12 trillion by 2028, and so that momentum is very much there. I think that if it's gone all wrong, two things for me. One, the experience economy would be only defined as high-level sport and our biggest global music artists. That to me is not the experience economy. that would be a massive, because essentially you'd have nothing coming up anyway, right? So our culture is not about Taylor Swift and, I don't know, Man United. Like, it just isn't, right? Like, it is part of it. So that would have gone horribly wrong, and would see literally the end, because there'd be no pipeline.
Mm.
And I think the other end is if I don't find a way, and I feel this very passionately, and this is where the revolution bit comes in. If I have failed at finding great marketing people to build these brands, because marketing experiences is not something that is easily done, and is not something that you just dip in and dip out of. It becomes a way of life. And the reason it becomes a way of life is because you really have to believe in it, because it's extraordinarily hard to do. Anyone trying to sell tickets, anyone who thinks they can, I'm like, crack on, because let me tell you, it is so hard. You literally couldn't work in a harder part of marketing than, having to build a brand and sell tickets. And we as marketers, therefore, I'm really passionate about finding more ways to tell our future audiences and our future customers, like, this is really good for you. Like, almost like that idea, like seeing it live is like part of your 5 a day. Like, that's not quite it's not quite pithy enough, but it came up. This amazing marketing man, Rob McPherson. He brought up this concept at On Sale Live in May, and I'm like, but you're right. Like, that's when we failed. If we haven't reminded people how important seeing it live is, seeing things you don't like as much as seeing things that you love. That would be terrible.
I think that last bit is really interesting about the sort of competition with the couch, almost, right? That the at-home experience is only going to get better and better, right? Particularly as you think about all the weird and wonderful things that are going to come out of AI. So it's frictionless, right, to go and sort of plug into whatever devices will exist in 5 or 10 years. That's, God knows what is going to come out of some of these AI companies. Obviously, Johnny Ive is working with OpenAI now on some device. But it is the job of marketers, ultimately, to give people the reasons to come out of their homes and go to these experiences and events, because they are so important. But it is, you're right, the job of marketers to compete with the couch and kind of get people out of the house and get them to show up to these events and buy tickets for these events.
That's it.
So we can make more of them.
Yes, and it's confusing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you look at these figures presented by, talented economists saying 12 trillion, worldwide. And then you're like, whoa, but hang on, it's never going to be easier to stay at home. So, and then I say, well, hang on, the only fix to this is great marketing. Like, that growth will only come if we are not only retaining great talent, but building great talent and building great platforms and great content to essentially fight for that attention.
Yeah, I could talk about this all day, but we'll have to do it another day instead.
Yeah, great.
So the final couple of questions I asked of everybody is, we've touched on this a little bit at the beginning, so I kind of know the sort of theme of what you're going to say, is if you were advising somebody just starting out in the industry, what's the one mistake you'd warn them to avoid, or what's the piece of advice that you would give them? You sort of touched on it earlier about, your own experience. But yeah, it'd be good to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So listen, I grew up, before setting up my first marketing agency, I grew up in agency life, and I worked, I was that millennial generation, right? So we worked a lot, we drank a lot. We didn't necessarily sleep under our desks, but we weren't far off, right? So Uh, and we also created some incredible marketing people by working that way. But times have absolutely changed. But what I would take away from that is that do not come into this industry if you are if you only want to work on one bit of marketing, right? There are much better industries to go. Like if you want to become a specialist, go find an industry that allows you to really, really double down. Even if you decide that eventually you want to bring that into experiences, but that for me, the best people I see growing up in the industry now are the ones who have the same this sort of can-do attitude of test and learn. I'm going to make that happen, and I'm as willing. I was catching up with a mentor of mine who was and we were laughing, like he was building an asset bank for some marketing materials, and I'm 45, so he's I would say at least 10 years older than me, and I sort of said, it doesn't change, right? Like just because we are at some point we're now seen as leaders in our industry, like you will always have that job to do. And if you're not that person who isn't prepared to still always have to do that, like this is not your industry.
Yeah.
That would be my observation.
Yeah, I think it's a good observation. But the opportunity, if you flip that, first of all, there should be plenty of opportunities for young people, right? There's lots of entry-level roles in the experience economy by definition, right, compared to other industries. But then what you've just said is that proximity to senior people that you get immediately means that if you, as you did, raise your hand and go for 2 hours upstairs to work on marketing campaigns just because you're curious and you're interested and you want to kind of put yourself forward, it's really easy to kind of be in control of your destiny, if you like, just by being proactive, curious, and getting stuck in.
Yeah, you're so right. I've never really thought of it like that, but like if I think that, in my early 20s, that's what I did. I popped upstairs to learn a bit of what became my craft. 20 odd, admittedly, it's taken me 20 odd years, this idea. So now apparently, I'm an architect of a live experience revolution. Like it only takes 20 years. Like I stuck with it because I passionately believe in all of it, in the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm new to the world of experiences, but that's the big observation that I've made. And what I'm excited about building a company in this space is that in a world where a lot of entry-level jobs are disappearing, for young people, I love the idea of being able to kind of create pathways for young people to get experience and work their way up. So it's exciting to be.
I would just say, just as part of that, we have, as part of On Sale Group, we have a marketing WhatsApp community. There's only 300 people in it, and we have a jobs board within that. So if there's anybody who is looking for a job or is looking for a sort of mentor or wants to, like, that kind of close proximity to the greatest marketing leaders in our industry, like maybe we share the link because everybody is invited to join that community.
Yeah, brilliant. I will put it in the show notes, definitely. Okay, so final question, and it's a bit of a cheeky one because I'm trying to link guests together. Who do you think I should be interviewing next, and what should I ask them about?
Yeah, so I think you should interview a gentleman called Matt McAllister. And Matt is the MD of a business called Intelligence Squared. And Intelligence Squared, I think, are interesting because their business has been around more than 20 years. Matt has been running it for fewer years than that. And they are moving. It's a really interesting time as they move from what they have been famous for, which is sort of these Oxbridge debates and discussions, politics, economics, as they move into slightly different programming, which is directly related to this kind of evolution of audiences and what they expect from us and what they want to hear about. So I think he'd be really interesting for you.
Sounds very interesting. Yeah, great. That's a great recommendation. Thank you. I will look Matt up for sure.
I'm happy to do that intro.
Oh yeah, great. Right, even better. Dawn, this has been really, really enjoyable and interesting, and I think there's so much, there's so many bells ringing in what you're saying, and I feel excited to be working on some of the sort of the challenges that you've mentioned as well. So, thanks very much again for spending the time.
Thank you. No, it was great to chat.